The criminal I was looking for was in my bed all along. "You're under arrest," I said, my voice steady, though my insides were anything but. Anthony stood there, hands raised slightly, the faintest smirk curling his lip. That damn smirk. How many times did it disarm me? Made me feel like the whole world wasn't heavy. Now it felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "Will you really pull the trigger on me?" he asked, his voice calm, too calm. His brown eyes locked onto mine, steady and unflinching. I gripped my gun tighter. My arms were shaking, but I held the barrel level with his chest. The Anthony I knew, or thought I knew, was gone. In his place stood the broker, the mastermind I'd been hunting for months. This man was responsible for chaos and destruction, the one who made me doubt my own skills as an investigator. And he was standing in our apartment, our safe space. My voice cracked, and I cursed under my breath. "Pull the trigger. Jack, do your job. Arrest him. Stop him." But my hands wouldn't move. How could I? He was my Anthony after all. Anthony, who made me laugh so hard I cried. Who made me feel like I wasn't just a man, but a whole person. But now he was this criminal who armed warlords and profited off death. "I never wanted you to find out like this," Anthony said softly, and that just made it worse. The warmth in his voice, the sincerity, it was all too much. But I'm not sorry for who I am. I've only ever done what I had to. "No," I said, shaking my head. "You've lied to me. You've used me." "Jack," he stepped forward. "Don't move," I snapped. Taking a step back, my gun wavered. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. "Do it then." Anthony's voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "Pull the trigger." I swallowed hard, my vision blurring. My fingers hovered over the trigger, and I hated myself, because I didn't know if I could. Flashback. 1 year ago. The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and stale frustration. We'd been at this for hours, and the broker was still just a ghost in our files. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing the bridge of my nose. The walls were covered in photos, maps, and timelines. Everything we had on the elusive international arms dealer. Not much. A blurry surveillance shot here, a shipment manifest there. Nothing that screamed mastermind. "All right," I said, trying to inject some energy into the room. "Let's go over this again. What do we know for sure?" Agent Ramirez, my second in command, clicked a few keys on her laptop. The screen lit up with a word of connections. Names, places, transactions. We know he's supplying weapons, at least to 3 major conflict zones. Eastern European, South Africa, and the Middle East. But the shipments are routed through so many shell companies, it's almost impossible to trace. I almost said, leaning forward, "We've got to find a crack somewhere." "What about the last bust in Rotterdam?" "That was small time," Ramirez said with a shrug. "The middlemen we caught barely knew what they were carrying. The broker's too good at keeping himself insulated." "And yet," I said, pointing to the map, "his shipments are showing up everywhere. Someone's coordinating this, and it's not magic." Agent Lin chimed in from across the table. "Maybe we're looking at this all wrong. What if we're focusing too much on the weapons and not enough on the relationships? Someone this powerful doesn't just deal in guns. He deals in people, alliances, loyalty. That's his real network." I nodded slowly. Lin had a point. "All right," I said, standing up and pacing. "Let's shift our focus. Focus on the money trail, yes, but also dig into his contacts. Any whispers, any connections, I want names." The team murmured their agreement, and I tried to ignore the gnawing doubt in my gut. The broker wasn't just clever, he was invisible, and that scared the hell out of me. Later that night, I was dead on my feet by that time I knocked on Anthony's door. The day has been brutal. Interrogations, dead leads, and the boss breathing down my neck about results. But all of that melted away the moment the door opened. Anthony stood there, barefoot in worn jeans, and a gray t-shirt that clung just right. His hair was damp, curling at the ends, like he'd just gotten out of the shower. He gave me a smile, warm and lazy, like he'd been waiting for me all day. "Rough one?" he asked, stepping aside to let me in. "You have no idea," I muttered, kicking off my shoes and dropping my bag near the door. The apartment smelled like something savory. Garlic? Herbs? Maybe a hint of lemon. I glanced towards the kitchen and saw 2 plates set on the table by the window. The setting sun poured golden light across the room, softening the edges of everything. "You cooked?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "Don't sound so shocked," he teased, walking over and sliding his arm around my waist. "I'm full of surprises." I chuckled, but it came out more like a sigh as I leaned into him. His touch was grounding, pulling me out of my own head. "Jack," he said softly, tilting his head back to look at me. His brown eyes were warm, steady. "You don't have to carry it all alone, you know. Whatever it is." I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. I didn't know how to explain how much I needed this, needed him. Instead, I kissed him. It was slow, easy, not desperate or hurried, just right. "Stay for dinner," he murmured against my lips. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely audible. "I think I need that." For the first time all day, the weight on my shoulders didn't feel so heavy. With Anthony, it was like I could breathe again. 2 months later, we thought we had him this time. The intel was good, too detailed to be fake. A shipment of high-grade weapons was coming in at Pier 27, and for once, the broker himself was supposed to oversee the deal. The team was in position, Ramirez stationed high on a crane, her rifle trained on the meeting spot. Lynn was in the surveillance van, watching every camera feed we could tap into. And me? I was crouched behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, my heart pounding in my ears as I waited for the signal. Truck approaching, Ramirez whispering through the comms. I peeked around the edge of the container. A black van rolled into view, its headlights cutting through the heavy fog that hung over the docks. 2 men climbed out, their movements precise and deliberate. One popped the back door open, revealing crates, weapons. I tightened my grip on my gun. "Wait for it," I murmured into the comm. Then, another car pulled up, a sleek black sedan. A tall man stepped out, dressed sharply, his hat casting a shadow over his face. My breath hitched. "Could it be him?" Lynn asked over the comms. "Hold position," I ordered. The men began talking, their voices low and muffled. I couldn't make out the words, but the body language was tense. Suddenly, the tall man gestured to the crates, and then to his watch. It had to be him. It had to be the broker. "Move in," I barked, and we burst from our positions. The moment our boots hit the dock, everything exploded into chaos. Smoke bombs went off, shrouding the entire area in a choking gray haze. Shouts echoed as shadowy figures darted between containers. "Eyes on target," I shouted, coughing as the acrid smoke stung my lungs. "I've got movement, heading west," Ramirez called out, but her voice was strained, unsure. By the time we reached the crates, the van and the sedan were gone. Tires screeched in the distance, their echoes mocking us. All that was left was the lingering smoke and the faint sound of waves lapping against the pier. "Check the crates," I snapped. Ramirez cracked open one, revealing the weapons inside. But it wasn't the guns that caught my attention. It was the crisp white envelope, taped to the lid. I ripped it off, my hands trembling with fury, and unfolded the note. "Better luck next time." I crushed the paper in my fist, my jaw tightening. "Damn it!" I yelled, kicking one of the crates enough to make it skid. Ramirez came up behind me, pulling off her mask. "It's like trying to catch smoke," she muttered. "Smoke with your bare hands," I finished, my voice low and seething. It was just that he escaped again. It was the way he toyed with us, like this is some kind of game, and I hated him for it. A few months later, the kitchen smelled like coffee and fresh toast, a quiet morning ritual that had quickly become one of the favorite parts of being with Anthony. He was leaning against the counter, casually sipping his mug, watching me with that relaxed, easygoing expression he always wore. I sat at the table, my own coffee untouched, as my mind churned over last night's disaster at the docks. It felt like a weight pressing down on me, and the constant pressure of chasing a shadow. "Rough night?" Anthony asked, breaking the silence. "Yeah," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "We were this close, but he slipped through our fingers again." He set his mug down and walked over, pulling out the chair across from me. "You're talking about the case, right? The one that's been eating you alive?" I nodded, but hesitated. "I can't tell you too much. It's classified. And it's for your safety too." Anthony raised his hand in a mocking surrender. "Fair enough. Just the basics then." I sighed, leaning back. "We're trying to nail this guy, an arms dealer. Smart, connected, always one step ahead. Last night he played us. Left us chasing smoke. Anthony tilted his head thoughtfully. Did he leave anything behind? A note? A pattern? Guys like these love making it personal. My eyes narrowed. Actually, yeah, he left us a note. Taunting us. Classic psychological play, Anthony said, leaning forward. It's not just about the weapons. It's about control. He wants you frustrated because it makes you predictable. What did you do after the note? We regrouped, planned our next steps, I said. Anthony nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. Good, but if he's that confident, he's probably got another layer of misdirection. You got to be thinking 2 moves ahead. Predict where he thinks you'll go next. Then do the opposite. I raised an eyebrow. You sound like you've done this before. He chuckled. I took a bit of criminal psychology in college. Helps me get into people's heads. Clearly, I said, half joking, but genuinely impressed. Anthony leaned back with a satisfied grin. Well, I'm happy to help. Just don't let him get in your head. Jack, that's how they win. For a moment, the weight of my shoulders didn't feel so crushing. With Anthony, even the impossible felt manageable. A few weeks later, for the first time in months, it felt like we caught a break. We raided a warehouse on the edge of the city, one Anthony had suggested might be worth looking into. It wasn't flashy or heavily guarded, but something about the location matched what he said about the broker, favoring out-of-the-way spots for smaller operations. When we stormed in, I half expected to see another dead end. Instead, we found crates, actual tangible evidence, guns, ammos, blueprints, and even a list of names. It wasn't the broker himself, but it's more than we've gotten in months. Standing amidst the organized chaos, watching my team catalog every piece of evidence, I couldn't help myself but feel lighter. Ramirez walked up, holding a clipboard. It's not the jackpot, but this is a solid lead. Whoever was running this place wasn't just a middleman. They were connected. Yeah, I said, looking around the dimly lit warehouse. Feels good to finally have something real to work with. As the team wrapped up, I stepped outside to call Anthony. I didn't usually share work details with him, but tonight felt different. When he picked up, his voice was warm and familiar. Hey, Jack, how'd it go? You were right, I said, pacing on the sidewalk. The place wasn't big, but it was something. We've got weapons, documents, and a few leads. It's a win! Anthony chuckled softly. Glad I could help. See, sometimes you just have to follow the smaller trails. They can lead you to the bigger things. I guess, I said, smiling despite myself. I didn't expect it to pay off so quickly. After months of chasing shadows. This feels good. It's because you're good at what you do, he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Thanks, I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in a while. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I was grinning. It felt like I was gaining ground in the hunt for the broker. And it was all thanks to Anthony. 2 months later, it was supposed to be the night we finally caught him. The broker's operation had been mysterious for months, just rumors and whispers about shipment deals and hidden locations. But tonight, we had everything. A solid lead from a trusted informant. A shipment coming in the old freight yard. This was it. The yard was quiet, the kind of eerie silence that made you feel like something was about to go wrong. Crusty train cars and old machinery loomed in the distance, and we finally moved carefully. Every step planned. Ramirez was covering the north side, Lynn was monitoring the thermal signature, and I was with the lead unit. We were all set. Target spotted, Lynn said. Voice came through the comm. 2 vehicles, southeast corner. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the shadows. The headlights of the vehicles flickering through the fog, and I could make out a group of men unloading crates from a truck. Their voices were low and urgent. Wait for my signal, I ordered, trying to steady my breath, the rush of adrenaline pushing through me. Then I saw him, or at least I thought I did, a tall figure in a dark coat, standing apart from the others. He didn't look like he was doing anything, just watching. The broker. It had to be. Go! I snapped, signaling the team to move. And then the chaos erupted. Smoke grenades exploded. The yard was swallowed by a thick smoke, and the sound of shuffling feet filled the air. I've got movement. To the east. Ramirez's voice crackled through the earpiece. They're doubling back, Lynn shouted. I ran towards the figure, but when I rounded the corner, he was already gone. Fast. Too fast. I felt the air shift, like he was already one step ahead of us. Every path I took led to another dead end. blocked by stacked containers, debris in places it shouldn't have been. It was like he'd been expecting us, and he knew exactly how to make us chase our own tails. Finally, we made it to the center of the yard. The truck, the cars were gone. All that was left was an empty crate and a small speaker. The recording clicked on, and a smooth voice came through, cold and mocking. "Close, Jack. Closer than last time, but not close enough. Let's see what you will come up with next." I stood there, staring at the speaker, my fists clenched. "He knew," Ramirez said, frustration in her voice. "Of course he knew," I muttered, kicking the crate, "but I'm not letting him get away this easy." A few minutes later, I don't know what came over me. Anger? Frustration? Maybe both. All I knew was I couldn't let him slip away again. The alley was narrow, dark, and smelled of trash. But none of that mattered. His footsteps were ahead of me. The sound of his boots hitting the wet pavement, clearly and steady. I pushed harder, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. The broker was close, closer than he'd ever been. "Stop!" I shouted, knowing he wouldn't. He glanced back for a split second, his face hidden by shadows of his own hood. Then he turned sharply into another alley, and I followed him without thinking. As I soon rounded the corner, I realized my mistake. He was waiting for me. A flash of movement, and I barely ducked in time to avoid the metal pipe swinging towards my head. It slammed into the wall with a loud clang, and I rushed forward, tackling him to the ground. We fought, rolling on the wet concrete. His fist came fast, but I managed to land a punch on his side. For a moment, I thought I had him, but then he elbowed me hard in the ribs, pushing me off, and slipped away. He was fast, faster than I expected, but I didn't let up. I chased him to the end of the alley. He was limping now, a noticeable wince in his stride, and I saw it. A deep, jagged cut across his arm, just above the elbow. It wasn't a regular injury, the way the blood dripped. I knew it wasn't something he could hide easily, but he was still fast. By the time I reached the streets, he'd vanished into the maze of the side roads. I leaned against the wall, gasping for air. My fists were tied at my sides. I'd wounded him, sure, but he'd gotten away again. Every step closer felt like 2 steps back. The broker was always just out of reach, and now I had a mark on him, something unique, something he couldn't hide forever. A few days later, I wasn't sure what had made me do it, but I found myself standing in front of Anthony's apartment door, my hand raised to knock. For days now, he'd been avoiding me, saying he was sick, claiming he needed rest, but I couldn't shake the feeling something wasn't right. I had just finished a long shift, and the case still weighing heavy on my mind. I needed to see him. I needed to know that he was okay, even if he didn't want me there. I knocked once, no answer. I knocked again, a little harder this time. Still nothing. That's when I decided to just do it. Walk in. I knew his routine by now. The door was unlocked, and I didn't hesitate. "Anthony?" I called as I stepped in. I heard movement from the bedroom. Then Anthony's voice, a little strained. "I'm not feeling well, Jack. You should go home." I frowned, my concern growing. "You've been saying that for days now. Let me see you." There was a pause, then the sound of shuffling. Anthony finally emerged from his room, looking fine, but his face seemed a little too pale. His smile, a little forced too. "I'm feeling better now," he said, trying to sound casual. "Are you sure about that?" I asked, stepping closer. "You've been acting weird lately." He shrugged, a soft laugh escaping his lips. "I told you, it's nothing, just a bug. Don't worry about me." We both sat down on the couch, and I felt the weight of the case hanging between us, but I couldn't stop myself from reaching over to him and resting my hand on his knee. We started talking, the conversation flowing easily at first, just casual stuff. Then, as we got closer, things started to heat up. I brushed my hand along his arm, leaning in to kiss him, but as I did, he flinched. I pulled back immediately. "Anthony, what's wrong?" I asked, my voice thick with concern. He waved it off, eyes avoiding mine. "It's nothing, really." But I wasn't convinced. I tugged at the hem of his shirt, gently trying to pull it up so I could see his side just to check. And then it happened. The fabric of his shirt torn, just a little bit, and beneath it was a wound, a deep, jagged cut on his arm, the same one I had seen on the broker. My heart dropped. No, it couldn't be. I froze, staring at the wound. It was unmistakable. The angle, the way the blood had dried on the edges. This was the same injury, the same mark I had seen on the broker just days ago. I backed away slowly, the truth dawning on me like a weight I couldn't escape. "Anthony." "No, No, it can't be. He didn't move. He just watched me with the same calm expression. I stood up, the words tumbling out of me before I could stop them. You're the broker. You're the one I've been chasing. He just smirked, that familiar smirk I had come to know. I reached for my gun, my hands shaking but steady. You're under arrest, I said, aiming my weapon at him. He didn't flinch, didn't even seem surprised. You really think you'll pull that trigger on me? Flashback end. I paused, the gun trembling in my grip, but my voice was cold. I will. I'm not letting you slip away again. His smirk widened, and for the first time, I saw something else in his eyes. It wasn't just calm, it was a challenge, a defiance I hadn't expected. You can try, Jack, he said softly, but it's not that simple. I barely had time to process his words before he was moving, fast. One moment, he was standing there with a smirk still on his face, and the next, he was in front of me, his hand brushing mine, slowly, but deliberately taking the gun from my grasp. My fingers barely had time to register the loss of control before his other hand reached up, gently cupping my face. I froze, caught in his gaze, those brown eyes that I had always held so much warmth, so much trust. Now they held something darker. You're not going to shoot me, he whispered, his voice soft but firm. You could never. Before I could respond, his lips pressed gently to my forehead. The kiss was almost tender, a strange contrast to the chaos swirling inside my chest. For a second, I thought I imagined the softness, the affection, but it was real, so real. Then he pulled back, his eyes locking onto mine. One last time, a flicker of something unreadable passing through between us. Goodbye, Jack, he said, his tone no longer soft, but resolute. Before I could stop him, before I could even fully comprehend what was happening, Anthony turned and strode towards the balcony. In a fluid motion, he threw open the glass door and stepped onto the edge. I rushed forward, but it was too late. His figure was already disappearing, his body leaning out over the edge of the 21st floor. A smile on his lips. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, my gun still in my hand, but my mind struggled to process it all. No, I shouted, desperate, but my voice came out weak, defeated. Anthony looked at me one last time, a smirk still curling at the corner of his lips. You'll never catch me, Jack, he called, his voice barely audible in the wind. And just like that, he was gone, vanishing into the night air, leaving me standing there, helpless. 1 year later. It had been a year since everything fell apart, a year since I lost Anthony, the man I thought I loved, the man I thought I hunted down with everything I had, only to find out he was the very criminal I had been chasing. The broker, the betrayal, had left a wound in me deeper than I'd care to admit, and I spent the months trying to bury that ache, focusing on my job, on everything that didn't remind me of him. But no matter how much I tried, I couldn't escape it. The nights were the worst. The silence would crawl in, and I'd find myself thinking about him, wondering what could have been, wondering if I had done something differently. I hated myself for it, hated the way I missed him, hated the pain of losing him was still there, gnawing at me. I hated the fact, even after everything, a part of me still cared about him. But that was the truth, whether I liked it or not. When I came home that night, exhausted from another dead-end search for the broker, I wasn't expecting anything. The apartment was quiet, like it always was now. The cold emptiness of it made my stomach tighten. But then I saw it, a letter, plain, unmarked, sitting on my doorstep. I frowned. My pulse quickened for a reason I couldn't explain. It wasn't the usual mail, nothing I had recognized. I bent down to pick it up. As for my fingers brushing against the envelope, it felt something familiar. A pang of recognition, a tightness in my chest, tore it out without thinking. The paper inside crisp, the handwritten bold and unmistakable. I know you miss me, but I never left. Meet me tonight. You know where. My heart slammed against my ribs. It couldn't be him. It couldn't. But deep down I knew it was. Later that night, I stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind biting through my jacket, my heart hammering in my chest. It was the same cliff where he once asked me to be his. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the horizon, but it didn't feel peaceful, not with him standing there. Anthony, the man I once trusted, the man I hated, the man I couldn't forget. He was waiting, just like he had said. His hands were in his pockets, his eyes focused on the distance, but I could see the tension in his posture. He knew why I was here. He knew how much it took for me to even show up. I walked towards him, my feet heavy, my thoughts a mess. Part of me wanted to pull out my phone, signal the entire police force, and arrest him right there. I could end this. I should end this. But I didn't. I couldn't. You know. I could have signaled the whole police force about you, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. You didn't, he continued, because you love me. No, I said, quickly shaking my head. I don't love you. Yes, you do, he replied softly, taking a closer step. And so do I. I froze. His words struck me harder than I cared to admit. I haven't been able to stop thinking about you, he continued. Nothing feels the same. Nothing makes me happy. All I think about, dream about, is you. My throat tightened. I couldn't find the words. Instead, all that came out was, you betrayed me. You deal in death. I can never love someone like you, betraying even yourself. Anthony's face softened. His eyes darkened with something I couldn't name. I know, but you don't understand everything. My past. The things that I did. The things I had to do. It wasn't always this way, Anthony said quietly. I grew up in a war zone, just trying to survive. I did what I had to, and somewhere, along the way, I lost myself. I heard it all quietly as he continued. But for you, I would leave it all in a heartbeat. I shook my head, barely believing what he was saying. You don't mean that. I thought I didn't too, he said, his voice low. But I do, Jack. I mean every word of it. I'd leave everything behind. This life, the people I've hurt. For you. My pulse raced. I couldn't hardly breathe as he spoke, the weight of his words sinking in. It won't be easy, he said, stepping close. I'm a marked man. We'll always have to run. Your team, other countries, they'll come after us. But we can hide. We can disappear. Jack, I'd spend the rest of my days with you, somewhere far away, grow old with you. My mind reeled. Was this even real? Could I trust him again? Could I even trust myself? Tell me, he said, his voice almost pleading. Would you take me? In a way, you'd be saving the world too. No more broker dealing death. I hesitated. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to feel. Anthony's eyes locked onto mine. Unwavering. 2 hours from now, he said, taking a step back. I'll be at the dock. If you come, we'll be together forever. If not, you'll never see me again. And with that, he turned, disappearing into the night like smoke, leaving me standing there, torn between love and duty, between what was and what could be. About 2 hours later, I stood there frozen, the weight of Anthony's words pressing down on me. My heart was pounding, my mind racing in 1,000 directions. He had made his choice clear. He was offering me a future, a chance to escape the mess that we were both tangled in. But could I trust him? Could I really go back with him after everything? My body was fighting with my mind. The logic in my head screamed at me to walk away, to let him disappear like smoke. But my heart, damn it, my heart was telling me something different. Before I knew it, my legs were moving. I didn't even think about it. It was like my body had made the decision for me. I was running, my breath sharp in the cold night air, chasing after him. I reached the dock, just as the sound of his footsteps faded into the distance. There he was, standing at the edge, looking out at the water, waiting. I could feel the anger and frustration building inside me, but there was something else too, the ache of longing. "Anthony!" I shouted, my voice rough, my pulse still racing. He turned around, his eyes lighting up just a little, like he knew what I was going to say. I closed the distance between us, my heart pounding harder with each step. Damn me and my stupidity, I muttered, my voice shaking. I'm trusting you again, but if you betray me one more time, I swear I'll kill you myself. And without thinking, without hesitating any longer, I kissed him. It was a hard, desperate kiss, like I was trying to make up for all the lost time, all the pain he'd caused me, and all the pain I'd caused him. Conclusion: we've been traveling through different countries, living a fast-paced but simple life. It's nothing I've known before, but it's everything I knew I wanted. The adventure, the freedom, and most of all, him. Every day is a new experience, and for the first time in a long while, I feel alive. I don't know what the future holds for us. But as long as we're together, I know it will be okay. We'll face whatever comes together, because with Anthony, I found something worth living for. And that's all I need. The end. Have you ever let your heart decide things for you? Thank you for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of the Rainbow Force. And stay wholesome.